This time we call the meeting to order. I would like to, let's see, it is 11 o'clock. Start off with roll call. Dolores Campion, present. Mr. Jerry Bittner.
Here.
Mr. Richard Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Pat Kiley.
Here.
Mr. David Morris.
Here.
Mr. Yelovich.
Here.
Mr. Robert Stanley's absent. Mr. William Weatherly.
Here.
Mr. Gary Halsey.
Gary Halsey here, and Mr. Chairman, for the record, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, 1 o'clock.
Said 11.
Correction. Correction, 1 o'clock. Thank you, Ms. Halsey. If you would, please put your phones on silent and say your name for the record before you speak. I'd appreciate it. And with that said, I'd also like to recognize the chair for Mr. George Ferry there, longtime public servant for the TDLR. He recently passed away here a few months ago, so the advisory board wants to recognize the chair. So we'll move on to item number C, approval of the minutes from the January 3rd meeting.
So moved.
Here, a second.
Second. Gary Halsey, second.
Motion carries. Approve the minutes. We move on to item number D, public comment. We have two. Ms. Shannon?
Good afternoon. My name's Shannon Noble. I represent the Texas Air Conditioning Contractors Association. And I am testifying about item G, discussion regarding continuing education requirements for renewal of the certified technician certification. We spoke informally about this with staff at the last advisory committee meeting, and I just wanted to go on the record as saying that TACA definitely supports a 4-hour per year requirement for continuing education for renewal of the certified technician license, not the legacy technician, but the new certified technician. And just the reason is that there is some education along with experience required to sit for the exam to get the new certification, and we want those certified technicians to stay up to date and to continue learning. I mean, we see that category as a pathway to full contractor licensure, and so the public's better served and their employers better served if certified technicians are continuing to be educated, and likewise they will be more qualified and ready to take the contractor exam when that time comes for them.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Mr. Halsey, Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Halsey and members of the board, we are definitely allowed to ask clarifying questions, and that is all because it's public comment and it's not on the agenda, so definitely ask your clarifying question. If it's anything further, we would have to move that to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
You support 4 hours.
Yes.
Any thought to any particular topics?
But
You don't need to respond now.
yeah, Shannon.
Okay.
And we love Ms. Noble, and I'm sure she can come up with that information for our next
Certainly.
meeting. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
We have one more, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Terry Morris. I work for a contracting company here in Austin, Texas. I was present for the last meeting and heard some really encouraging things that lead me to believe that the task force that you guys are creating to actually handle this licensing versus certification aspect are really moving in the right direction. I think most of the folks in the field that I have talked to in and around the Central Texas area, between San Antonio and here, really believe in that. I think you lend a lot of credibility to the profession if you start to delineate our roles as the other licensed profession. All MEP should be equal. It confuses the public when it's not. One of the things I heard the last time around was that you're going to have 2 levels of certification, and I think this young lady just mentioned a couple of those. If you're going to have a registered technician and you're going to have a certified technician, how can you possibly say they can do the same job but they don't have the same requirements? That really needs to be consolidated. It needs to be put together to where you have one area, one designation in between what I will call the equivalent of the master's contractor or an apprentice. Now, it's well lined out for the public to understand, and it's going to confuse the public if it confuses us, and I'm sitting here confused. So not being able to delineate that out is going to be a big problem. As you work through that, you as members, I think, have the opportunity to look at how we structure this. What I see right now is being able to put together the future of the HVAC industry in Texas, period. You guys have that right before you right now, and I'm excited about that. I just hope that you consider everything, take your time, and please take enough time to consider every aspect, get all the public input that you can before you finally put this down in concrete. So I would set your goals in concrete, make your plans in sand, that it can be moved around, because you're going to encounter some things that are going to have to change as you go through this. And I know legal's going to work with you along the way. You're going to have a lot of obstacles to overcome, but I know you can do it. And I know it's going to benefit us as a profession. It's going to make us all look more professional. It's going to get us more educated, as she mentioned. And it's going to protect the public interest, because we see stories out there all the time where we have to go behind and correct these jobs that were done incorrectly. We had one in particular, and I'll hurry, so I know my time is limited, that we worked on about 3 to 4 weeks ago. Very simple thing, that an HVAC furnace was not hard piped. And the pipe had been bent around in such a fashion that it had almost worn through in 2 places. I can't tell you how dangerous that is. We probably almost lost a house and lives in that instance. And it had been from a prior job for a, quote, HVAC technician did the job. These things are out there. So your job is real. You guys have a real responsibility. But as you start to work through this, I hope that you'll allow more input from the public, and that you'll go and gather all the information you can and make a very good informed decision before you do it. But I think you're on the right track. I really do. And I appreciate that. I'd like to reserve the opportunity possibly to comment maybe on a couple of things later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. All right, that ends our public comments. Let's move on to E, staff reporting.
Good afternoon, Chairman, gentlemen. I'm Lisa Hodak with the Licensing Division. And my update for you includes September through January for this year, the last 5 months. As you can see, there is an overall increase in the total population numbers. Currently, our total of all license types combined is over 45,000. And if you'll notice, that's quite a bit, an increase of over 5,000 from fiscal year 2015. So we're continuing to stay busy. Applications are coming in. I expect quite a bit more will come in when the new license type or revised license type will come about. I'm also excited to say that I've got 2 new employees starting on my team. One will be starting on the 15th of this month, and she comes to us from our Licensing Support Division. And she also previously worked at the Department of State and Health Human Services. I had the pleasure of working with her when those license types came over, so I saw that she was going to be really good for our agency, and I'm excited for her to start with us. And then probably April or May will be the next new hire for my team. So we're going to continue to stay busy, and I'm excited I got 2 new people. And I'll be happy to answer anything else that you may have of me.
Board members, any questions?
None here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members.
Good afternoon.
My name is Trey Seals, Director of Customer Service, and this is our second time. And I'd like to do a briefer report this time without the introduction, and just to start out with how busy we are at this time, and it is a very busy season for us. So as the last report alluded to, yes, there's a lot going on in our division, and we are taking on those challenges head on. But just wanted to talk about the increased or rising call volumes and email volumes. We had one employee who started, and unfortunately that person has also decided the traffic was just, the Austin traffic is just too much for them. So they did go ahead and resign. So that is unfortunate. So I will be posting for another position for 2 more candidates to get us to our fully staffed as possible. One of the things I did want to go over from the last meeting, I think it was Mr. Anderson's request, was a request for more of a breakdown on our stats. So it's not in your report, the breakdown, because I'm still tweaking and getting it as good as I can get it. Working with my staff on the numbers and tweaking and making sure we got it as clean and clear as possible. But as you can see, just for the report that you do have, the calls and emails are trending around a little more than 2,000 per month since the beginning of the fiscal year in September. And so it's very steady for this industry. As you can see, it continues to be phone calls is the primary way that folks from this industry like to reach out to us, which is our most challenging channel for connecting with us, I will admit. The breakdown, though, that I wanted to give a little more information on is the types of phone calls that we're getting for this industry. And mainly, it is, overwhelmingly, it's license status is the main question. We do get several compliance-related questions, and we do get those over to our regulatory program management division now. Excuse me. And then we do get calls from general inquiries from the public requesting information on how to find a contractor and just basic information about the industry. And we direct them to the website. So there are a lot of navigational type questions where we do assist folks with finding information they're looking for on the website. But primarily it is it's general info and the license status question. So, and we do our best to get to those as quickly as we can and let folks know an estimate of when that license will be issued. So that is the conclusion of my report today. I am also open to any questions should you have any.
Board members, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Gary Halsey, I have a question. So the any incoming call you intercept first. And that's what this reflects if it concerns ACR.
Correct.
Okay. Say most of it is about license renewal.
Yes, sir.
Or someone is looking for a reference to a contractor.
Yes, sir.
But even a complaint would come through you.
It could,
First.
absolutely. They
But
could also.
not necessarily?
They could also find the link to the site on our site. There is a place where you can place a complaint
Okay.
by the website, which is the preferred method, but we do get those phone calls as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Trey, Dave Yelovic. First, appreciate your report. These numbers for today's day and age, having 3/4 of these things come through phone calls seems a little out of the norm for today's high-tech public. You said it's challenging to take calls, which I understand that probably eats up all the time. What is being done to maybe gear it more toward an email-type correspondence?
Sure. Great question. Thank you. What we've recently done is we've implemented a customer relationship management software program by Microsoft called Office 365 Dynamics 365 for short. And it is allowing us to create incidents, and we're moving in the direction of more of a case management approach to how we handle our contacts. And so that we can capture that information, let the customer know, we'll call you, don't call us back. If you can hold off, give us a little time. We'll check in with you periodically to let you know, no change on that, that has moved, or this is what we need. And then with our email, we have a way of creating an auto response when folks do send us an email, and that will give them the top reasons folks might contact us, and that in case your question is on this list, then that can be found usually on our website. The other thing we have done is on our website, we are working with our Office of Strategic Communications and to update content, and we're going program by program by program, reviewing, is that language, is that clear there, or could that be more clear? And so it's a multi-pronged approach.
Is it an easy task for the public to send you an email?
It is, yes. From the Contact Us page, they just click on the link and initiate an email. We are looking at ways, though, to further, we believe email is probably, can be improved just in general, just from the way forms can be used. For example, we're considering where we would collect the information, even though we haven't spoken to the customer. They don't always know what we need when they send in the initial email. So we're thinking about a system where we can collect the information we do absolutely need so that we can research and then actually get back with an actual response instead of more questions before we can then get the actual answer that we need to get that customer. So we're looking at email as well and how we can improve that.
Thank you, that helps.
Yes, sir.
Dave, this Gary Halsey, Mr. Chairman, please. That's an interesting comment. I know that when I call, a service center, I really enjoy speaking to someone.
Yes.
I always have the option of sending an email.
Yes.
And, but if it's a license inquiry, that's a different thing. I would not want to discourage the public who has a problem, that their only communication is by email,
Right.
that they can call.
Agreed. Yes.
But us contractors, what are we doing on the phone call anyway?
We like a both-and approach. So we always know that we will have folks who need paper forms, for example, or that they will need to have that extra touch with the phone call. So we'll always be there for phone calls. It is the busiest channel, so it's just the way it goes. But we're there for either, and always looking to improve on both.
Richard Anderson. I had a question about your, I guess, frequently asked questions or your automated response.
Yes, sir.
How often are you monitoring those and updating those? Because
Yes.
part of tracking how you're doing your job is those questions
Yes.
should change, right?
Yes. And you're talking about the frequently asked questions on the website or
As
our
well as the
auto
ones you're
response?
putting in the email response.
Okay.
Because you said you're putting those in an automatic response
Right,
also, right?
right. And that's something that we've been testing and will be up and running fully in a couple months on the customer relationship management. That's a new software upgrade for us, and we're excited about it. So we are measuring, and our folks wrap up each time they end the call with the reason that the call came in. We also look at the reasons that the call came in to determine, do we need to add a new reason or do we need to take that one away? So it is a constant adjustment and measuring and then adjust again and then remeasure. It's an iterative process, and we try to be rapid about it, but yeah, it is definitely something we continue to look at and measure.
Pat Kiley.
Yes, sir.
Is our team bilingual?
Yes, sir. We have several languages, Spanish, English, of course, Korean, Vietnamese, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. Oh, Mandarin. Yes. Yes.
Jerry Bittner, do you have a chat feature on your website?
We do not use chat. We do not use chat.
Trey, if I could, Carla James, TDLR, if I could add something. I just learned this morning that our Chief Information Officer is starting to look into a chat feature. That is not just around the corner for us. We have to find resources to do that and may have to ask for that through the next legislative process, but it is something that
Yes.
we're, Trey wasn't in this meeting, so I don't feel like I'm stealing any thunder
It's
from
okay.
him, but that is something that we're looking at. I know that I prefer chatting when I need help, so definitely
Yes,
thinking about
very
going down that
effective.
road.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, one last question, please. And I don't know if this meeting, is it being aired or broadcast live right now
Yes.
Yes, sir.
via YouTube?
Yes.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the information.
Of course.
Mr. Chairman, Nick Voinis, TDLR. Mr. Halsey, let me explain. All of our advisory board meetings are live streamed on YouTube,
Very good. Thank you.
including our commission meetings as well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, advisory board members. My name is John Mellick. I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. Apologize for a little bit under the weather. The allergies are kind of getting me right now. But with that said, we had a couple of different speaking engagements since our last advisory board meeting. The first one that I'll talk to you about was the San Antonio Air Conditioning Contractors Association HVAC Expo. We had Representative Robert Nino there manning a booth for TDLR. He was there along with Jesse Velasquez, who is the San Antonio Chief Mechanical Inspector. They were there just mainly to show a presence and also to entertain any questions that might have come by from people stopping by at the booth. We had another investigator, Tony Gattaca, on December 15th, give a CLE presentation at Johnson AC in Houston. It basically was kind of what our procedures were and some data relating to the different numbers aspects that we have in the Enforcement Division, and also entertained any questions that we had there. Moving along to the different cases we have 5 different cases to talk about today. The first one being Joseph Cardona. This was an agreed order that was signed January 24th of this year. He is an air conditioning and refrigeration technician. He went to an undercover sting location, submitted a bid for work that our undercover investigators were soliciting. He agreed to pay a penalty of $1,750. He has paid $500 of that already. Basically the first 2 months of 2018 is what he's paid. So he's on a payment plan. The second case is Tony Henry. This was a default order signed at the very beginning part of this year. He has never been licensed by the department in any capacity. He offered to perform at a job site as a air conditioning contractor. He was actually paid $2,870 of an almost $3,500 contract, but he never performed any of the work. Just took the money and kind of ran. As a result, we entered a default order of $5,000 because he never responded to any of our attempts to contact him, either through the investigator or our subsequent violation letters. So a default order was issued. And currently that is in our collection status. So basically after we get a default order, the department will try to make a couple of contacts to try to collect on any of those default orders. We're currently in the second phase of that, sending our second collection letter out on Mr. Henry. The third case is Jules Williams. This is also an agreed order signed on the January 23rd of this year. She failed to provide some proper installation by failing to support the plenum. She failed to properly seal a duct and failed to properly size the evaporator cooling coil. She paid an agreed a fine of $3,000, which she actually paid the entire amount, and she's also taking an additional 8 hours of continuing education on top of her normal required continuing education to keep her contractor's license. Fourth case is Jeffrey Moore. This is a default order signed January 23rd of this year. He is an air conditioning and refrigeration technician, but on 2 separate occasions he performed work without having the required air conditioning contractor's license, kind of a moonlighting type situation. He did not respond to our notice letter, and so subsequently we entered into the default order for $8,000 against Mr. Moore. The last case is Jorge Santos. It's an agreed order for at beginning of January of 2018. He does not hold a license, and he also showed up to one of our undercover stings where he offered to perform the work that was being solicited. He stated he could perform the job for $1,800. He is paying a penalty of $1,750. I know the report says that he had paid $250, but I checked this morning and he has paid a second payment of $250, so he's keeping up with his payment plan in that regard. Finally, if you take a look at our case statistics, as you can see, These are up through January of this year. We've opened about a little over 400 cases, closed nearly 300 of those cases, issued about $162,000 worth of penalties this year. At the same time, we've collected a little over $25,000 of those penalties. A lot of that sometimes due is to some of these default orders where we have high dollar amounts that we issue, but we don't see a whole lot of collection sometimes on those. But with that, that wraps up my report. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Board members, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Gary Halsey. You know, like any of these cases, like the one, say, Jules
Mhm.
Williams, did they make whole that customer system?
It does not appear as such. They just came into an agreed order with the department. A lot of times if we have a situation where a contractor has done wrong on a system, you'll either see a warning letter being issued because, or the complaint will withdraw the complaint, so you guys wouldn't actually see any of those results. Typically, if it has come to this point with an agreed order or default order, they've either just made the business decision to pay the penalty or that they haven't responded and they haven't made the customer whole.
Okay. Thank you.
Board members, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Weatherly. I'm looking at the case of Mr. Henry, Tony Henry.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Looks like that was not only did he perform without a license, but that's fraud, basically. Would this ever be referred to a criminal case?
We can refer it to, but we will refer to the AG's office. So the next step after this will be to referring it to the AG's office. We also have, we've kind of signed off on a new policy where usually it's for unlicensed cases only. If we start seeing these repeat unlicensed offenders, is to make a referral to the AG's office for an injunction. And at that point in time, they would try to get it, the AG's office would try to get an injunction. And if they're in violation, if we get another case, refer that back to the AG's office and say they're in violation of your AG injunction. So this would be a case of such.
Thank you.
Board members? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Chairman and board members. My name is Lorraine Srove, and I'm with the Education and Examination Division. You should have your report in front of you, which you will see we have hired 3 new employees in our division, and you will also find our statistics for the examinations and for the continuing education courses, which, of course, since we just met in January, there's not been a large change there. But if you want to review through there, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those for you. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
Board members, any questions?
I had a quick question about exams.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything on the horizon to allow or planning for a different way to take the test? So I know a lot of college classes now are doing like where they're monitoring through a webcam and things like that, and that it's all monitored, so you don't have to go to a testing facility. You can like do it at your house and monitoring. Has anybody thought or looked into that?
For examinations, no. But we have been moving forward on expanding our continuing education providers and encouraging them to look at new ways of technology that they could use. In fact, we have even used some of that in some of our other programs, such as the cosmetology schools, for distance education. So we're always looking for new ways, but that has not been considered for the exams, no.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Rebecca Armas, and I'm with the Education Examination Division, and I assist with the development of the examination. One of the things we want to think about, it'd be great to have that, however, the question of exam security comes into play. You have someone that, yes, they may be monitoring, but there could be someone in their home taking pictures, and then the items would be compromised. This is for the benefit of exam security. We're working on constantly asking our third-party vendor to reevaluate whether or not their sites are, maybe they need to open an additional site because we have a larger volume of examinations, and they continue to do that. That would be something that we would look at in the future, but as far as taking a secured examination at home, I just can't see that happening because of exam security. We want to make sure that we have the securest exam to make sure that we have safe and competent licensees in the state of Texas.
Dolores Compion, how many programs are you overseeing currently?
Just our division
Yes.
or the? 30. We oversee the majority of those. There is an exception of about 5 of the programs that do not have a education or continuing education component.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary Winston, that would be about 34.
34?
Minus the
Currently?
5, 34.
Thank you. All right, thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair, Advisory Board members. David Gonzalez with the new moniker. You heard a few of our other divisions refer to us as the Regulatory Programs Management Division. This will probably be the last report that says Compliance Division. We've got some recalibration and renaming going on at the agency. A couple of points from the report that I'd like to bring to your attention. The very first one has to do with how excited I am to be here today for our rules review follow-up, because as part of the bill implementation, that rules review is very important for us to be able to move forward with draft FAQs and things that we've done along the way. But the rules feedback that we get from the public is very important to our process to make sure that we've got all our I's dotted and our T's crossed. So excited about the agenda item coming up. And the second bullet point, which is probably the most important one for me, is a plug for the ACR program specialist posting that went out in February. We are currently without a chief ACR program specialist for the state of Texas, so this is a shameless plug for someone to put in application for that position. We're looking for hard workers. This is not a cushy job that you're going to be sitting back. There's lots of work to be done, so definitely, if you have interest, please put your application in. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer them.
Board members, any questions?
When are you going to come out with a cushy job?
It doesn't exist here at TDLR, sir. Thank you for the question, though.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Mr. Chairman, Nick Voinis, TDLR Chief of Staff, and I'm joined here by Carla James, our Deputy Executive Director today. Here to bring you our Executive Office report, a little summary of what's been going on around the agency these days. First off, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to the state of Texas. We received some news here the other day that Governor Abbott recently appointed 2 new commissioners to our board for terms to expire in 2023. He added Ray Callis, a physician and anesthesiologist from Beaumont, and Gary Wesson, a retired orthodontist from Bastrop, to our 7-member commission. You can find additional background information on them as posted on our website, tdlr.texas.gov. Due to the large number of the growth in our programs here at the agency, that we've been given over the last couple of years, we've instituted an internal calibration or adjustment to better serve our customers. And these were subtle internal changes, but as the end user, you should see nothing different in the way you experience anything than from before. Behind the scenes, we've adjusted to make some increased workflow, move more efficiently throughout the agency. And our staff has been busy the last few months, as we've reported last time, on our bill implementation, the programs that have been added over the last 2 years, or the last 2 sessions. A majority of the work has been completed, but this is a process that will continue as we continue to implement programs this year and next. This spring, we'll take on our strategic planning exercise to improve the way that we regulate our programs. It's something that the legislature mandates every state agency to do every 2 years, and it's something that we take very seriously. 2 years ago, we identified 58 strategic initiatives to address during last year's legislative session, and proud to report that 56 of them were passed and signed into law. So plans are being finalized, and we are currently set to host sessions in Houston, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Austin, El Paso, and Tyler. And for those that are unable to attend any of those sessions in person, they'll be able to participate electronically. Also wanted to give you a little update again on our website. TDLR.texas.gov is our chief tool to communicate with stakeholders and the public. And your recent web traffic numbers are really, really good. And happy to report that over the last 6 months, the ACR website had 190,108 page views, and that's an average of about 1,033 per day. Your folks are also on the go, and because 51% of those people who accessed the site did so from a smartphone, and add in another 5% from a tablet, and that compares to 44% that did so from a desktop computer. The top reasons for visiting your site are online licensing, frequently asked questions, laws and rules, forms, and exam information. Again, I want to remind you that we are active on social media. You can keep up with TDLR activities and news on Facebook and Twitter. And we also have a large number of subscribers that receive our various email blasts pertaining to your program, anywhere from more than 63,000 to about 72,000, depending on the message, whether it's continuing ed, exams, fines and penalties, forms, FAQs, and meetings, events. So if anyone is not receiving those and would like to, they could go to the website and subscribe there. Finally, our staff are known for their generosity, and this was confirmed again last month at the State Employee Charitable Campaign Awards Ceremony, where TDLR was awarded the highest per capita gift for an agency of 301 to 500 employees. And what this means is that our staff contributed more per person to the 2017 campaign than any agency in our size, and that was over $34,000. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to agenda F.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, advisory board members. My name is Doug Jennings. I'm Assistant General Counsel for the department. Before you, you have recommended, you have the proposed rules at 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 75, drafted by the agency and most recently approved for publication by this body some 2 months ago for publication. These rules put into place the Certified Technician Program, or Certified Technician Certification type, put into place by House Bill 3029 in the last legislative session. We received 3 comments during the public comment period. 2 weren't really relevant to the rules, and one of the comments noted a couple of small errors that I will address with you right now. You'll notice, I believe, if you have a hard copy of the rules in front of you, I believe you should. If you don't, please let me know. You will see a couple of strike-throughs on the first page in Section 7510, and that's subsections 10 and 12. You will see, as the rules were published, they had some bad numbering. The cross-references used a numbering scheme that we had actually used in an earlier draft of the rules, and so we would like your permission to proceed and change those to reflect the correct cross-references. On page 6 of the handout, and that is Rule 75.73, subsection A5. We noted that the word "unless" was missing from that subsection, so we wanted to add that to make that clearer. And additionally, on page 9, that is 75.122. What is that now? C3. We would like to remove that extraneous "and" at the end of that subsection. Because we didn't really receive any substantive feedback from the comments. We don't really have any substance to address, but I entertain any questions from the board. But moving just real quick, we will notice that the commission should be meeting on March 27th. Should you make a recommendation to should you make a motion to recommend these rules for adoption, they would become effective on May 1st. Now, we talked about this last time. These rules put the program of certified technician into place. These rules are kind of the bare bones. We believe we can start taking applications on September 1st, as directed by House Bill 3029. But these are not the final word. These rules, like any other rule, are subject to revision as we get feedback. And I think one of the Mr. Halsey and I spoke right before the meeting. I think a point of interest is that the educational programs that will be required for the certified technician type, we're not aware of any of these programs fully existing yet. And so we will need some time as a department to evaluate the programs that are being offered, to figure out what the criteria are beyond what is mentioned in the statute, a combination of 2,000 hours of classroom experience and on-the-job experience, classroom instruction and on-the-job experience. So, as this program progresses and matures, we will like your feedback, determining how the rules need to change, what the criteria for the educational programs should look, and things like that. So, we need to have these rules in place so we can start accepting applications, but don't view this as a final product. We will continue working on these as the program matures.
Board members, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. It's Gary Halsey. So what good does it do you to accept an application and you haven't got a program in place? You don't know what to test to.
Mr. Halsey, we have statutory criteria that tell us.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry.
No, continue, please. We have statutory criteria that explain that we have to, the requirement for the license is 2,000 hours, or for the educational program is 2,000 hours consisting of a combination of classroom instruction and on-the-job experience. That is what the statute has given us, and that is what we have to put in these rules. Like I said, if we were in an environment where these programs already existed, we would really be in a great position to put any additional criteria in place. We will be calling upon this group to do just that, I believe, as this program progresses. I believe that we are fully equipped to start taking applications and start granting this certification. Would I like to see more clarity in the rules defining the educational programs? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have liked to see more direction in the statute, but I believe we can fill that gap.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we table this item and immediately convene a work group among the ACR boards to help define what this 2,000 hours is and what topics are to be covered. There is no outline of this at all. And I think that's not, I don't know the persons within TDLR that would equip that, and that is all for the reason of this ACR board, is to help advise on that technical expertise.
Mr. Chairman and Board, Mary Winston, TDLR, that work group can be convened even if this isn't tabled. The broad rules that we have in front of us mirror the statute, which is somewhat broad, but it's what the legislature felt was enough for us to begin. However, we can move forward, and we want to move forward. I see David's come to the table. We don't have to table it. It's your choice. You're the board. But these rules can be implemented, and simultaneously we can move forward with this group, with a work group, to tighten up these rules.
I don't know that I understand what you're saying, Ms. Williams.
Winston?
And I understand where you folks are coming from. But I think once this is approved, it's out of control. And I think there would not be anybody here that would disagree. In fact, you just said it, Mr. Jennings, that it would be ideal if we had this in place. But I cannot see any reason to take an application that we're going to certify you to a big question mark, what program?
Dolores Compion, this, a lot of hard work and man hours went into this. I know Mr. John Lane, TACA, and all these individuals put a lot of effort into what they. My question wrote this in. Is that correct?
September.
That's kind of our runway?
September 1, we need to be.
September 1?
David Gonzalez, September 1 is when we need to have this in effect.
My question would be, do we feel confident enough to get those particulars in place and move forward?
This is David Gonzalez. It is a very short timeline that we provided for the bill implementation. It is possible. That's why my fingers were crossed that we were going to be able to move forward with the rules. Definitely understand Mr. Halsey's concerns about leaving it open-ended, but there's nothing more scary than throwing a party, having a license available for people, and nobody putting in an application because the requirements are too restrictive or too defined. We're sticking with statute and the very broad statutory authority that we've been provided and direction we've been provided to make sure that we at least get 1, 2, 3, maybe we're going to get multitudes. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but you don't know until those applications comes in. I do understand your concerns about once the cat is out of the bag, how do you get back in? I believe we're still going to have, with the rules as written, the authority and the input available to us for the advisory board on what we can look at for approving the program. It is very broad, but again, I don't want to narrow the field before we've even gotten off the ground yet. That's my biggest concern, is we throw the party, we got the license or certification available, and we don't have enough of these certification programs to fill the technicians that need to be out there for certification.
Well, you know, Gary Halsey again, this is a big deal, certified technician. There's a lot of people out in the industry that are excited about it. And they're excited about the classroom part of it. And there's absolutely nothing mentioned other than it'll be a combination of 2,000 hours. Now, when you look at certified technician, they're going to be required to have 2 years full-time experience. Okay, well, there's 4,160. Well, can I take 10 hours classroom? And here's my 2 years experience, let me sit for the exam? Who's to say no? Who's to say no? That's as well-defined as the statute says.
Understood.
So that's why I'm encouraging the board here, is to table this to the next meeting. There'll be plenty of time to hit the September 1 deadline, and we bring back some structure to this very, very important topic that will, like I said, help define the future of ACR for the state of Texas. But to jump out there with no definition at all, I think is ill-advised.
Richard Anderson, I'd like to ask a question about the exam that we're all talking about. And how long does TDLR need, once the rules are in place, to start developing that exam? And what does the big picture look like, right? So we're talking about the possibility of us recommending these, and then doing an exam and what that looks like, and then also adding to these requirements between now and September 1st to meet the state requirement. Am I following this correctly?
This is David Gonzalez. So you've got the general course correct. These rules are the first step in a bigger picture. The exam development is actually already scheduled for late March. There are a few individuals here that are subject matter experts, but we would bring those subject matter experts to determine and I may end up deferring to our examination education division, but they would do an job analysis to make sure we understand the full breadth of what a certified technician should know, what their job responsibilities are going to be, and that would be incorporated into the questions that are developed, the bank of questions for an exam for a certified technician, which has not been done to date. Everything we've done to date for the legacy certification is accepting a national exam that's been provided by others. This would be the first time that we've actually gone into that detail. So there is an opportunity to address whatever deficiencies, whatever concerns, whatever priorities we want to establish for those that are taking this exam that has to be passed in order to get the certification, which that's what we're counting on to distinguish where that accountability would be and the education would be.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel. I would just like to mention that adopting these rules puts the certification program into place. I believe it will give our department authority to start preparing frequently asked questions. I feel like there is a lot of behind-the-scenes work you may not be privy to get a program like this off the ground. And the easier we have, the earlier we have the foundation built, the better product we can give consumers. Ultimately, the more work we can do here, the further ahead of the curve we can get. I do take issue with the characterization that this program is not ready to launch. I believe that it is unclear to some extent. I mean, the problem that we're facing here is that the statute gave us a very broad definition of the educational program. There is no doubt that we'll be perfectly candid about that. Again, we'll be perfectly candid about the fact that it could use refinement. That's my personal opinion. I think if there could be a potential issue where if we try to refine this, if we try to restrict the program's definition of an educational program too far, we could also run into issues with that. I believe by putting this, we've had several opportunities to address this issue. We will have several opportunities in the future to address this issue. And so, from my perspective, I would appreciate adopting these rules so they can become effective May 1st, and we can continue. We can make sure that we can accept applications come September 1st, and we can continue, even today, if needed, to start looking at this and decide if any further action needs to be taken, if clarification needs to be made to Section 75.122, and how that would look. That's just my candid feedback. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Carla James, TDLR. I would echo what Doug is saying, that a lot of work is happening behind the scenes. And I would also state, and Doug will stop me if I'm speaking incorrectly, that this is the first go at this. So once these rules are in place, that's certainly not the end of your group looking at the rules. There is also an opportunity at your next meeting, bringing forward your work group information. In my experience with the other advisory boards, they have to open their rules all the time. So this is not a one-and-done situation. And so I believe the gentleman holding his hand up.
Yes, I was waiting.
Yeah, this is not open for public comment, I do not believe.
Not at this time.
Okay, so just.
It's at the chairman's discretion if he shall decide.
It's at the chairman's discretion once the deputy director finishes her comment and we continue this conversation and repertoire. Then chairman knows his rights and duties. He'll handle that at that time. I just didn't want to interrupt Ms.
Hold up on any
James.
public comments at this point.
Awesome.
Point of order.
We
So-
don't accept live motions from the floor during this part of our agenda. I believe you, Mr. Chairman, is going to take that at the end or whenever you decide, as soon as our staff finishes what she was saying.
Well, I believe, with Dolores Compion, I believe that we can really get the best of both. We can develop a work group to refine, because we got a short window based on statute. And so developing a work group to coincide with the implementation. So I am on unfamiliar waters here, but I would want a motion to adopt.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
You have
Point
to
of order.
call for his
All right,
first.
you have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
Second?
I would like to second Mr. Halsey's motion, please.
Call for a vote now.
Vote?
In favor? Aye.
No.
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 Could we get a roll call? Would that be okay?
Tamala?
Because I hear 2 for and 2 against.
Tamala is going to take, she's going to get a microphone, and we're going to get that taken.
Vote for, can I get your name?
David Morris.
David?
I'm sorry, I was going to call roll. I was,
Okay.
Mr. Compion? For or
No.
against? Mr. Bittner?
No.
Mr. Anderson?
Against.
Patrick Kiley?
No.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Weatherly? Mr. Halsey?
For.
Mr. Yelovic?
No.
Your motion dies.
So I want to make a counter motion to accept as is with the corrections noted by Mr. Dutton. Do I hear a
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I would like you to revise your motion to, that the board has, will come back with structure to the 2,000-hour requirement?
Do you, Mr. Chairman, is that your motion, or if you had a complete motion, we do need to vote on your motion?
Right. I vote on the, my motion is to keep what we have with Mr. Jennings' corrections. Do I hear a?
Point of order. I've asked the motioner to, if he would consider revising his motion to include the language that the board has, can come back and give structure to the 2,000 hours.
Do we have a second?
That actually is your motion, and he's asking you to revise your motion, so you have
I'm
that
not
right.
revising my motion.
Okay.
Do we hear, we need to
I've
vote?
seconded the motion.
Second the motion, Mr.
Bittner.
Bittner? We need to put it to vote. For?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Carla James, TDLR, if I could clarify to make sure that we're all in understanding that the motion is to move forward with the rules, with the changes that Mr. Jennings has proposed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Compion?
Yes.
Mr. Bittner?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Kiley?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Against?
Mr. Weatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Halsey?
No.
Mr. Yelovic?
Yes.
Your motion passes.
Thank you.
We move on to Agenda G. I don't recall who were the board members in discussing the continuing education, so at this time, any discussion on that from the board?
I had, I guess maybe wasn't my idea, but I was looking at the agenda and said this is, I wanted to make just a quick comment. As far as I know, education is still in the room, that I see over the past few years, passing rates have ticked up, and that's a good thing. However, I do question, I've always questioned since I got on this board is, why we have education contractors, that if they were our kids in school and only 30 or 40% of the kids are passing, we would accept that as a really good school. And on that note, kind of what you were talking about, education, I think, is the key to our organization here. That if we are going to train the next generation of folks to come up in this industry, the burden is on education, yes, and also on contractors to teach their guys the right way of doing things. I shared a story earlier about, there is a, how can I say this, a head of a certain education place down in Houston that doesn't even believe in manual J's. To your point, should we say, hey, X amount of hours shall be taught teaching everybody about manual J's? Continuing education should be talking about manual J's since we've gone over the new rule and all this other stuff. What do we do to teach our guys about this stuff? We can have enforcement and all this stuff, but without people being taught how to do it right and having some sort of structure, because what do we have, 50 or 60 education places? And each one of them has a department ahead, and his way is his way, and they send in a classroom idea, and we stamp it yes or no, right? And that doesn't bring any kind of uniformity to a system. And so I see that's kind of where we're lacking. And if we want to call this discussion regarding continuing ed, to me, it's just all about education. That I do like to have a nice polished program to say, hey, this is what everyone's being taught around the state. Everything's kind of the same. There's different ways to teach, don't get me wrong. But we should lay out, hey, this is what we expect them to teach, instead of the schools telling us, hey, we read your regulations, we read the law, here's what we propose. And we just say yes or no. So maybe a 5-year or 10-year plan, that's where I'd like to go with what we're doing as far as education, because that's the focus. We can come up with all sorts of rules and regulations, but teaching people how to do it and how to do it right uniformly across a really big state, that's where the rubber meets the road. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Yelovic. I'm giving the eye to our education ladies in the back, and I see David nodding, and you've given us some great food for thought. And internally, we'll have some discussions because I know what you're looking for. It's a good thing. So it's not going to be a plug and play, but we do need to discuss this and move forward.
Thank you.
Dolores Compion, great analogy, sir. Thank you.
So, Richard Anderson, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, absolutely, sir.
We're talking solely on this one, the topic was supposed to be continuing education requirements for the renewal of certified technicians, right? That was supposed to be the subject here. And I know TACA came up with a 4-hour kind of requirement. I'm just wondering where that number came from, right? And do we need some research to support that? We have different continuing education requirements for different licensing throughout the state. So
yes.
how do we figure out, we need to figure out what the criteria we're going to want in that program before I think we can put a time frame on it. Because it might be 8 hours if we want a lot of stuff in there. It may be able to be done in 4 hours or 6 hours.
I agree, Mr. Anderson, and staff hasn't tampered that number down. That did come from an association that's not internal. So, and we haven't been provided the rationale. Mr. Holsey has requested that, and Ms. Noble is quite willing to, I'm speaking for her, I think she nodded at me. Yes, she's quite willing to give that from the association. And the staff will, she can bring that back to you guys. Staff will come up with, we have professionals and divisions that handle this. That's not our number. That is the association's number. But they're going to come back with their rationale.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're going to look at it as a
Yes.
whole, and because
We will.
I know for the ACR license, it's pretty well spelled out what's going to
Yes.
be, and you're going to have 2 hours of this and this and that. And I'd like to see that same structure for this continuing education requirement as well.
And I think, Mary Winston, again, we will be calling again on the work group to get some definition to this. The association will bring in the rationale and the reason for the 4-hour suggestion, but this board will have its own rationale for whatever the amount of hours that they're going to present to the commission.
And don't take anything I said the wrong way. I believe we need to get input from our external stakeholders as well, that their input is very important to what we do.
Yes, thank you.
This is Gary Halsey. Addressing the continuing education of a certified technician. we've got to first determine what it is that we want them to know. Goes to my point of why I was considering all of this at that time, that we're kind of a little ahead of the game, but I appreciate TDLR's ambition. Nonetheless, I hope it's something more than what the ACR current licensing continuing eds is. As you know, most all of it, probably most everybody, I'm sure, takes the online course for $39 and 8 hours, and it's most all code and some law and rule, etc. But if you'll go to the violations, the biggest, most predominant area of violation is code. So what good is this doing? Frankly, you know, as we get into the continuing ed for certified technicians, I would like to see them being able to have the latitude of being take continuing education courses, maybe not from one site, but more learn about particular systems, manufacturer systems, the products that they're working with, duct insulation, refrigerants, etc. Their technical capabilities. You know, beating them in the head with a hammer on code, they got that book in their office if they're interested. But that's the largest violation we've got. But technical competence would go a long way. So I would like, as we consider this, is focus on technical competence. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as the non-technical guy, is there a way that we can have a visual of the licenses we offer, the requirement for experience, and the requirement for education?
We can do that, Mr.
Somewhere up on
Kylie.
this chart or somewhere, so we can all relate to the same thing. That would be very helpful.
Mary Winston, TDLR, we will get that for you. That's a great idea, thank you.
Thank you.
We will get that. The divisions are hereby on notice.
Mr. Anderson, Carla James, TDLR, you said, please don't take offense. We don't take offense to anything you all say. You're here serving the state of Texas, and we're just happy to have you.
Thank you for all the input, board members. If there's no other comments, let's move on to item H. Mr. Hawes, I think you were the lead on this work group.
And the contractor's licensing structure and requirements that kind of left off, but we have a work group, and we have just begun. We've had 2 meetings, but this is extensive. It's huge. This is bigger than the 800-pound gorilla when you start considering how the complexity of our profession is, and how the marketplace is going. And I heard a gentleman very much describe, it was this morning I was speaking with, and it was that our society has evolved to the point of high speciality, and so has our profession in many different ways, and that we should consider those. But again, we have just broached the subject. We do not have anything at all to begin to come to present to the board. We will have more meetings. This is as we firm up our ideas and progress on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Halsey. Appreciate that. This is Dolores Compion. So moving on to item I, recommendations for the next items for the board meeting. I recommend you had mentioned something earlier in the conversation, training on
Open meetings.
open meetings.
Yes. And it'll be open meetings, open records, and APA.
And we'll have that set for an agenda item for the next meeting. Moving
Also,
on.
I just want to make sure we get Mr. Kiley's request that we have a visual. Bless you, John. Aside from the visual, we're going to have those divisions explain that visual. So we'll make sure we word that in a way that we have an explanation and discussion.
It's part of the next agenda item as well
Yes.
for the next meeting. Thank you.
Jerry Bittner, I think on that visual, it may be helpful as well to summarize, if you will, what the various work elements are that are going to be able to be performed by this technician, that the new position has been created, because I think all too often it's easy mentally to drift over into what a licensed contractor can do as opposed to what the intent of this regulation is for the certified technician. And I think if what he's able to do is summarized in the visual, that's going to be beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Moving on to item J. That's kind of up in the air at the moment. We've got a lot of things to work on, so I think we were kind of forecasting either a July or June date.
Mr. Chairman, Nick Voinis, TDLR. We'd like to, if we could, let's maybe see how the work groups are going, and Tamla can get in touch with you guys here in the future to set up that date.
Absolutely.
We don't have to do it today.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So with that said, that brings us to item K, which is adjournment. If there's no other comments or questions, I say that we end it at, and I got the glare, I can't see the thing, so can someone help me out with the time?
2:12, Mr. Chairman.
2:12?